Hello there. Today I'm on a stopover in Dubai, flying with Emirates from Auckland through to London and Gatwick. Unfortunately, there was a slight delay when we left Auckland, so I have a slightly longer layover here in Dubai. So I thought I'd make the best use of my time by checking out the selection of wines available in the business class lounge here. I don't know about you, but I love watching YouTube flight reviews. However, I do find some of the reviewers, people like Noel Phillips, Nonstop Dan, fantastic reviewers for flights, but they really don't say very much about the wines. So I thought I'd take the chance to try and address some of that. And actually, in the lounge here in Dubai, they often have some really quite impressive wines to try. One of Emirates' aims is to have the best wine selection in the skies, and certainly I can always find something to attract my attention amongst the selection available to try here. So here I'm looking at the 2008 vintage of Smith Haut Lafitte Rouge. So Smith Haut Lafitte from Pessac-Léognan, and since 1955, when the Grape was classified, the red wine for Smith Haut Lafitte has been a Grand Cru Classé. Subsequently, the quality of their white has improved, and some might say even exceeded the quality of their red, but it's the red that has the classification. Now, the estate here has been owned since 1990 by Florence and Daniel Cathiard. There are 78 hectares of vines here, and those are all managed organically. The terroir here is a low hill of stones, about half an hour's drive to the south of the outskirts of Bordeaux, a site where grapes have been grown historically for a long time. The first record of grape growing here goes back to 1365. The estate is named after its gravel plateau, Lafitte, a name obviously seen elsewhere in Bordeaux. The different chateaus with Lafitte in the name aren't necessarily related. So the 2008 vintage was a good, if not great, vintage here, and certainly at Smith Haut Lafitte it was rather overshadowed by their 2009, which gained some really rave reviews. Essentially, there was quite a late start to the vintage, and during the period of flowering, budburst and beyond, conditions were cold, they were wet, and there was significant disease pressure in the vineyard. And for some producers, this significantly reduced the production of Merlot. Conditions were difficult right the way up through to the end of August. But then in September, the weather turned, and there was sufficient heat to ripen most of the grapes. Again, for some producers, not all the Merlot ripened completely. So what you tend to get is fresh, elegant wines, some of which had some slightly awkward angular tannins that now, 17 years later, have mostly smoothed out, allowing some of the wines to show much better at this stage. The fruit was entirely hand-picked, and the notes I have say high-tech sorting was employed at the winery, so I'm assuming that the use of optical sorters to remove berries that are poorly coloured, undersized, damaged, misshapen, anything that doesn't fit into the set of criteria to which the machine is set. The winery here is specially set up to ensure that all the movement of juice and wine is done by gravity. Fermentation goes on with the grapes going whole into small open wooden fermenters, with the temperature being kept down to 28 degrees at most, and daily punching down the cap of skins that's risen to the surface back into the fermenting must is used to manage extraction. The blend in 2008 was 60% Cabernet Sauvignon with 32% of Merlot, 7% of Cabernet Franc, and a single percentage of Petit de Verdot, just rounding that off there. The wine aged in French oak barriques, 60% of which were new, for 18 months. In Smith Haut Lafitte's very impressive cellars, evidently the cellars here will hold somewhere in the region of 10,000 barrels. The notes I've seen suggest this has been drinking since 2011, so should be fully mature now, but the wine has the potential to stay in the cellar until 2045. So let's take a look at it, shall we? There's a good depth of colour there, it's almost but not quite opaque. I can just make out the stem of the glass as I look through it. Looking at the wine as I swirl it, it's labelled as having 13.5% alcohol, and it's forming some tears. They're quite slight, they take a little while to fall. I don't think this is going to be the biggest, richest or most structured Smith Haut Lafitte that I've tasted. So looking at the aromas, there are notes of red currant, of prune. There's some really quite vivid notes at the back of pencil shape, showing quite a well-integrated cedariness to the wine. There might even just be the first hints of high-toned, sort of mushroomy hints coming through, and rose petals as the wine goes into later stages of development. The aromas are of a medium to full intensity. They're not enormous, but they are quite complex, and they are starting to show signs of more advanced development. So let's have a taste. On the palate, there's a combination of those developed notes and cedary notes that are preceding plummy fruit on the mid palate. There's quite a gripping, grainy structure, and the wine is of at least medium body. The alcohol, 13.5%, is not intruding upon the wine at all. It may be giving a little bit of richness to the back palate, but actually most of the structure is coming from the tannins. They do seem to be slightly drying on the mid palate, but actually there's enough acidity to make sure that the red fruit gives notes of plum, maybe raspberry and cranberry, just on the finish where it complements those more drying oak notes. I'm really delighted to be able to taste this wine in these surroundings. The wines I can taste here in the lounge at Dubai are one of the benefits of flying with Emirates, and I think they do a good job of making sure there's an interesting selection of relatively mature wines always available to taste here. I did take a look at the Wine Search aggregated critic score for this, which came out at 91 out of 100. And I do think that's about where this wine sits in terms of its quality. If I take issue with anything, it's the idea that this is going to age gracefully out to 2045. I'm not entirely convinced it has the fruit to do that, and its tannins may overtake them in the meantime. However, in some ways that is a typicity for Smith Haut Lafitte that can sometimes be a little austere and structured in its style. So thank you so much for watching. I do hope you've enjoyed the video. If you have, do please press the like button. I'd really appreciate that. If you'd like to watch more of these videos, do please consider signing up and subscribing to my YouTube channel. I'd really appreciate your support there. If you have any friends you think might like to watch the video, do please pass it on. I'd be really grateful for your support in that way. And if you have any comments, please do pop those in the comments box below. I will leave a link in the notes below to the Wine Searcher website so that you can see where this vintage is available and at what price. So thank you again for watching, and maybe you'll manage to make some time and come and join me for another tasting in the very near future. Until then, bye for now.